different reports coming out of the locker room at halftime with Bama down 20-7. It goes something like this. Nick Saban doesn't say a lot, has the team around him before they go back out. And he says something like this, Lugs, they're not going to smoke on our field. They're not going to disrespect us. They're not going to smoke on our field. And the other players started saying, they're not going to smoke. They're not going to smoke. And then the whole group starts chanting, they're not going to smoke. And that's all the coach said. And they come out in the second half, and they shut out Tennessee 27-0 in the second half and come back and win that football game. A tale of two halves. What did you think of that Alabama comeback?
Well, I chuckle because I feel like this is what we are going to see from Alabama each and every week. This is one of the most uniquely formulated football teams that week in and week out somehow is managing to still be the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but almost act and play like an underdog at the same time. It's very strange to watch how this team complements each other in all three phases of the game. It was almost the exact opposite of what we saw at the game I had the week before with Arkansas and Alabama, a tale of two halves. And this is what we're going to see. It's a little bit like Auburn's offense. Like, get used to it, Alabama.
Excuse me. I lost my earpiece. We're having all kinds of difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Oh, absolutely, man.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, we're having all kinds of difficulties today. But I think this is what you're going to see out of Alabama's offense as well. Like I said, it's like Auburn's offense. It's going to be a continual work in progress of trying to figure out how do we manage to get a first down? Then how do we get the next first down? Then how do we somehow get into the red area and not settle for a field goal? When I watched them come out at halftime and saw that drive and momentum quickly shifted, then all of a sudden Tennessee started to make some play call decisions. We've talked about fourth down decisions and some play calls that were made in other games this weekend. Well, there were some made in the Tennessee game with Alabama too that I think had a lasting impact. But I just think Alabama is one of those teams that if they get hot, look out. If they don't get hot and every single series is a struggle, then you've got a chance to play with them into the fourth quarter. The problem is they got hot in the second half, and defensively, the scoop and score and all of the momentum remained on Alabama's side for the entire half. Tennessee was never able to get any of it back.
Yeah, unbelievable play on the second play out of the gate from Milroe to Isaiah Bond, 46 yards there. And then the defense, does what that defense does at times. I didn't think they could shut them down the way they did, especially after that first half when Squirrel had 100 yards receiving and Milton was cruising in that first half. But they did that. A couple of guys who were forced in because of injury. Jahad Campbell, unbelievable at defense. Forget the touchdown. That was the work of Braswell. He just scooped it up and ran it in. He had like 9 or 10 tackles, 5 or 6 solo tackles. And then there's Amos, who has to come in for Terrion Arnold, who is having a tough day out on the corner, gets a concussion. So here comes Amos in again. He's forced into action. And then all of a sudden there's no more Squirrel. There's no more throws on that side. Amazing job by those two guys in relief of some starters.
It's like the Texas A&M game. Instead of it being Malachi Moore, it was Terrion Arnold. And so now you pull him out, you replace with Trey Amos at corner, you got Moore back, you still have Caleb Downs. Against Arkansas, Jihad Campbell was, third on the depth chart, barely saw any work, any valuable reps in that game. And the next thing you know, he's playing lights out against Tennessee. That's where the competitive depth comes into play. I agree with you in this one regard, too, where I thought Alabama really stepped up, made some nice adjustments. I was surprised at how successful Joe Milton was with his legs. He created some plays, extended some plays, got valuable positive yardage on plays that looked like they could have been near mishaps in negative yards. But he starts off 9 for 9. They completely shut him down in the second half completely. For the most part, there was no offense to be seen from Tennessee. And listen, everybody's talking about officiating and penalties. And listen, do I think there were some ticky-tack calls in that game? Yes. But let's point something out here. There's only been one game going back to the Texas-Alabama game where the opponent has had fewer penalties than Alabama.
Oh.
So are we now going to say that because Alabama had fewer penalties and Tennessee had more, that the officials are making sure Tennessee wins the game? Well, what about all those other games? Listen, officiating, poor officiating, does not discriminate. We see it every week, regardless of conference. You're going to have calls go your way. You're going to have poor calls made. You're going to have a call like we talked about in the Texas-Houston game that should have been overturned, and it wasn't.
Well,
I understand the frustration, but the frustration is part of the game in every contest.
There were 9 penalties in the game, only 9 penalties, so they were letting them play. 8 of them were against Tennessee. I will tell you, you asked Rodell Williams today if they called every flag they could call on Tennessee, that forearm shiver when he's already down to the back of his helmet there. I mean, my God, if that was a quarterback they hit, that kid would have been in prison for 5 to 10 years for assault.
Yeah.
No flag there. And then don't get Alabama fans started on what went on in Knoxville last year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was 9 penalties. I'll sit and watch that all day long, only 9 penalties. Now, for Alabama to take 17 penalties last year and whittle that down to 1, that's a good little home field there. But, I thought they let them play. They let them play in the SEC. Were there some holding calls not made? Absolutely. I can show you the same
there is
way.
Every game.
Yeah, I could show you Tennessee lineman holding Alabama's great defensive lineman as well, too. It works both ways. I really did not like the way Josh Heupel handled that afterwards, and we'll play it later on. But he gets asked about did he think it was a fair shake, and he gives you 28 seconds of silence. Was that silence long enough? To me, that's like you saying something. If I'm the commissioner, I fine him. I don't know about you. I don't like that. Either say it or don't say it, dude. Don't just sit there and be silent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can afford the fine. You can afford it.
That's right. You can afford the fine. If you thought it wasn't fairly officiated, then step up and say it. Don't sit there and act like a kid. Alabama now up to number 9 in the polls, and they get this bye week. So it comes at a good time. Get everybody a little healthier. Let them rest a little bit as they work their way back. And then there's LSU, who also has a bye week. They took care of Army as expected, 62-0. And initially you think to yourself, can Alabama score enough with LSU? But I want to ask you the big question today. We got 2 weeks to talk about this. But can Alabama's defense keep that game manageable against LSU's offense and the great Jaden Daniels and those receivers? Do you think Bama's defense matches up with LSU's offense to make this a super competitive game in 2 weeks in Tuscaloosa?
Better than any game that LSU has played to this point. Better than any defensive effort that they've seen from this point. Yes. Is it easier said than done? Absolutely. I continually point to quarterback run game, improvised plays, the movement of the pocket that you'll see from LSU, not knowing where the quarterback's going to be in a stationary framework, which is where you'd like them to be each and every time. I think Jaden Daniels is a Heisman Trophy candidate. I think the fact that they've got 2 losses is unfortunate because he's absolutely played lights out. At times he's played unconscious, both through the air and on the ground. The weapons are outstanding. I think that there is enough, particularly with Alabama's front, and not just the front 3 or 4, but really the front 7 as a whole when we include the linebacking core, that can get off the field a few times, that can create some negative plays, that can put LSU behind the chains. I think that's the one thing about LSU, if you watch them and you've really kind of paid close attention, because they're so fun to watch on offense, but they've been able to stay on schedule. They've rarely been in negative disadvantages when it comes to line to gain, particularly on the critical downs that matter most, 1st and 3rd. And so can they do it? Yes. Then when they get the ball back, the question then becomes, can they go score touchdowns? Can Alabama go score touchdowns? And I said about the Tennessee game, when Alabama gets hot, it may not be pretty, but all of a sudden they score at a clip. And when they're not hot, it's a struggle. And I don't think they can afford, if their defense gets off the field and gives them the ball back, they can't afford to sputter because they may not have that many of those opportunities.
Deborah Campbell is good. Talking about Jihad there as his backup role. Michael makes a great point. Caden Proctor, who's got all the skills in the world, played a little bit better this week at that left tackle position, especially in the second half. Sooner Rod, if Jaden Daniels beats Bama, he'll win the Heisman. Jerry has a question before we take our first break, our only break. Was Bama's second half comeback a sign of their improvement throughout the season? I don't see them doing that in week 2 or 3 earlier this year. So they didn't see that team playing that good in the second half as they did in the second half against Texas. Is that a sign to you that they've improved through this part of the season?
They've absolutely improved. The better question might be, can we see them do that for 4 quarters? That's the issue. Can we see them come out of the locker room in the first quarter, go up and down the field and score and run the football and make some big explosive plays, not take sacks, be minimally penalized, and then do it in the second quarter, and then do it in the third quarter, and then finish it out in the fourth quarter? That's what I think is frustrating Nick Saban so much and this staff so much, is nobody can put it together for 4 quarters. Then when we see that, and will we see it? I don't know. But if we see that, then you're going to see a really dangerous football team.
Alabama using more orbit and jet action to help keep the defense thinking. What do you think of that in this football game, where they did a couple of the jet sweeps and a lot of action moving across the quarterback, and then the handoff to Jace McClellan, who had a good game? What did you think of that action that seemed to be a little bit of a new wrinkle?
I think anytime you create any type of window dressing, cross action in the backfield, especially right as the ball is being snapped, you have the opportunity to influence the defense and create eye violations so that you get them going in a direction that the ball is not. That's always going to help, because what it does, it sets up your angles for certain blocking schemes, certain gap schemes. The other part of it is I think they're doing it to help out Jalen Milroe when they are going to throw the ball. Give an indicator when that guy's coming across in motion. If there's somebody coming with him, guess what? It's man-to-man coverage, all right? If they just bump over and that guy sits over there and they're going to bump it over here, it's a great indicator that it's going to be zone coverage. So it gives the quarterback an idea pre-snap of what he's likely going to see, which is then going to take him where he needs to go with the football. So little things like that I think are great opportunities to grow your quarterback, to give him things that, send a message and at least allow him to know where to go with the ball post-snap. Doesn't mean that it's always going to remain what you think it is, but it does give you the opportunity to get a little bit of a head start prior to the play being snapped.